All right, guys. I've been talking for a while now. This is Truth Lies Shenanigans. This is shenanigans, right? So I've been talking for a while now how Trump was planning to steal the election weeks before the election even started, and that we had made it, and then we had to make it impossible for him to steal it. Fortunately, mission accomplished. We made it pretty much impossible. But as we all know, he failed to concede, and he's still trying to find a way. Now he's trying to flip electors. For those that may not understand the Electoral College, let me give you a little background. All right. Now, each state is slightly different, so this scenario doesn't work for all of them. But basically, each state has an assigned number of electoral votes based on a few factors, mostly population. But each party submits a list of electors that will represent their party, Democrat, Republican, for their state in a national electoral college vote. And the party that wins the popular vote in a particular state, say Maryland, Virginia, gets their list of electors approved. So if the Democrats win in Maryland, their list of electors gets approved, and then they go vote in electoral college, right? And they do that in December. They go vote on behalf of their state. So what Trump wants to do is in states where Democratic electors have been chosen, he wants GOP leaders in those states to send the list of Republican electors to go vote instead of the list of Democratic electors chosen by the voters. Also, keep in mind, electors in some states can vote for whomever they want, regardless of how the vote turned out. They're not mandated by the state by law. Some states mandate the states by law to vote if you were elected. Some states have laws where if you're an elector, you can vote for whomever you want. Now, I do want to note that Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016 did actually try to uh, flip some electors to vote for her, but it didn't work. Um, but she did focus on places where it was legal to switch your vote. Um, but it's not legal in the places where Trump is going for. All right. So, with all that said, the GOP in those states refused to break the law. So, my question to you guys is, does any of this seem right? Or should this electoral college thing just go away? I'll start with Rob B.
It's the Electoral College was something I always had a difficult time understanding, and I had to do a little bit more reading and you ask questions. And to me, it's a flawed system. It doesn't make sense to me. There's the popular vote, there's the vote of the people. There's no super vote. There's no vote that can effectively veto or trump yours. It's the popular vote, the number of votes by the people that should determine leadership. So to me, it's something that's antiquated and shouldn't exist. If anything, it corrupts and undermines your election process.
Lizzie, your thought.
One, I'm glad that we're doing this topic because still there are so many Americans who do not know how the electoral college works. They're not aware of what it does. Everyone thinks in this country that it's a popular vote system, and that's not the case. So I can't tell you the number of conversations that I've had with people, even in the past week, trying to explain how the electoral college works. I do, like Rob said, I do think it's a very, excuse me, antiquated system. I think it's no longer effective, not in a country where you have 360 million plus people. So you could have, a state like California that, yeah, they have more electoral votes than a small state like Wyoming. But still, that populace is not fully represented. And so I think we need to go back and redo, and it would have to be through the Constitution because the Electoral
Yeah,
College is part of the
amendment.
Constitution.
Mhm.
But I think we need to go back and redo how we vote in this country. And it's not something that needs to be brought up every 4 years during a
Mm.
general election year. That's the only time in this country when you really hear people start to talk about the Electoral College. And it's the same gripe that they had the 4 years prior. If this is something that we want to eradicate and revamp within our system, it needs to get done starting January 21st, 2021. But yeah, I don't think it works anymore. I don't think it's effective. And I think it's starting to hinder our process,
Mhm.
especially when you have so much pushback after the election because people don't understand how the system works.
So my thoughts are I used to believe that there was a value to the electoral college because if you look at states, we're so spread out. The United States is a very spread out country. So
Mhm.
ideals and needs and requirements are different over in Montana than they are here in Washington, D.C., or in New York or California. So what they need as far as representation is different.
Yeah.
Um, so an electoral college kind of gives you an ability to have a greater effect on who you're able to, who your state or who your area or geographic location is able to influence as far as president. So there was some value in that I always felt. But the realization came to me when I saw a graphic, and I wish I had it, but um, where you realize that basically it's land that's voting. It disenfranchises people, individuals, because the country is not land. Even though the needs may be different in different geographical areas, which is true, um, still representation and the needs of individuals should be of greater importance, I believe. So I
Uh,
think each vote needs to count towards, um, a president. I think at least the president should be popular vote.
mm. And
So Mike Winter
there,
mentioned that explanation wasn't clear, and I apologize if my explanation wasn't clear. The Electoral College was formed so that smaller states like Wyoming, like a Delaware, like a Rhode Island, that they would have a fair advantage in terms of the voting process, in terms of the representation coming from their states. However, I think because when it was formed, the country wasn't as big. There weren't as that many people living
mm,
in the United States as we have now.
Right.
And like Neil mentioned or alluded to, you were mostly talking about land representation at that point,
Hmm.
not necessarily people. And so one of the problems with the Electoral College that would be eradicated with just going by the popular vote is it's always the first candidate to get to 270. In a popular vote, you wouldn't have that number. It would be by the end of business, and we establish what that end of business date is, who has the most votes, period. It's not the first to this, the first to that. And you alleviate the possibility of what Trump is trying to do now in
yeah.
influencing electors.
Right.
It's all about the number of people who are voting, and it might encourage more people to vote.
It
Because
would.
where, as it stands now, a lot of people say my vote doesn't matter. Well, it would in a popular vote situation. Every vote would count.
Yeah, because
Rob?
honestly, oh, go ahead, Robbie. I'll let you
We're
say your point. I want to
No,
mention.
I agree with Liz 100%. And just as our conversation is flowing, some of the comments online really line up with it. From Jacqueline Robinson, she says the Electoral College is an antiquated holdover from slavery and it needs to be abolished. Quickly, right after that, Mike Winter posted slavery plus rural America is how we got an Electoral College. Black people, as usual, were the bargaining chip that we're given up first. And we were talking about this before the show, where that it absolutely reminded me of some of the conversation we've had where that's it. It's the land holder that has the voice of the people on the land. Well, in this case, like these are elected representatives, so the people gave them power. They don't have the right to undo what the people have done.
Yeah.
The people have spoken.
See, in my opinion, we have the Congress for a reason, so that there is representation in government for areas, for land, for states. So we have the Congress for that. But when it comes down to the individual of the president, I really think we don't need a secondary means of representation of areas. Um, and of course there's gerrymandering and there's all this other stuff. And so they're easily able to manipulate the vote when necessary, because how often has it been that we've elected Republican presidents who lost the popular vote. It's been often. It's been at least 3 in the last, what, 5 elections, 4, 6 elections, I think it is, where the Republican candidate lost the popular vote and was elected to be president. Because
Hold
I
up.
know
Let me
it
just
happened with Bush, it happened with Trump, and it happened with um, who else did it happen? Bush, Trump, yeah, Trump twice. Well, Trump twice. Okay, so 2 times anyway.
let me to piggyback off of that, look at the states that we are really talking about here.
Yeah,
Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona. 3 states that have traditionally voted Republican. 3 states or that have had the Republican qualifying electoral votes, if you will. 3 states that Trump has now said have been a source of contention because they anticipated that those electoral votes, based on the past and based on influence, that they would get those votes. Then you saw all of a sudden the mail-in votes coming in and the people speaking and the number of people voting in a certain direction, and it changed everything. And so that's why the popular vote is now important, more so than ever, in that you have people who have been disenfranchised before, but now they're being encouraged to vote. And that can swing things. And
yeah,
so that's one of the main reasons why we need to get rid of this system and go and count every single
every
vote
single vote.
or whom people want to vote for.
I agree. Mike Wolf made another great statement here. So he says the bigger problem is the Senate. The inequality of the representation electoral college is based on the inequality of representation in the Senate. And of course, Mike Winter mentioned right after them, House representation is based on population, whereas the Senate is 2 per state. And he said he mentions that DC statehood illuminates this problem as well, which
That's why they
and
don't
I
want
agree that there's not fair representation in the Senate. Um,
these taxation without representation. That's why they don't want DC statehood.
right.
But Senate representation comes from people voting. And if we get more people voting, we would have better and more fair representation in the Senate.
Yep.
You don't vote, you're not, and I'm not talking about just a general election. You know, there are other elections outside of every 4 years. And if you don't vote, you can't change these numbers in
And
Congress.
Mike Wolf also pointed out some numbers. So, for example, Wisconsin's population is 5.8 million, 2 senators. California has 39.5 million and 2 senators. So, let's say we keep the Senate and the House of Representatives as is, then that's even more of a reason that we should be going popular vote, because that's why the Senate and the president have so much power, you know, and the representation is not equal to individuals. Only the House is, and again, even the House itself is gerrymandered in a way that manipulates where people are still underrepresented. So, yeah, I think the Electoral College personally has to go. Um, Although I had not totally agreed with it until this election, I definitely think it has to go. All right, final